So, you want to play as Dracula. You want to be the Lord of Darkness, who is a philosophical personification of sexual predators in the Victorian era. Okay, well, you made this choice, not me, so let's make the best of it. All joking aside, what can I tell you about how to play well as Dracula? Somebody has to play the bad guy, and that wasn't a joke about what he represents. He is the bad guy, the most evil of guys. So to train how to be a good hunter, we must learn how to be a good Dracula. As Van Helsing said in the book, we must get into the child brain of Dracula to determine how he thinks, so we may kill him. But here I am ranting again about my great desire to kill vampires, but you didn't come here for that. You came here for how to be a vampire. Yikes. There's a lot of places I could start, and a lot of advice I could give, but the main advice I think that you need to understand to play Dracula that most people play wrong, and that I think there is the most room for improvement within the community, is regarding encounter cards. Encounter cards and how to combo them is really important to understand. Now, when judging encounter cards, there's three metrics that you need to look at. There's the value that the encounter has when it matures, the value the encounter has when you ambush with it, and the value the encounter has when it is a trap. Basically, when a hunter searches a location and it's surprise, the encounter is this. All of those three things are different, and you want to look at your encounters in different ways and use them in different ways depending on what those values are. None of the encounters are good at all of them, except Unnatural Fog, and so you need to understand that and use the right ones in the right circumstance. I'm not going to talk about the vampires first because the vampires are kind of their own thing. I'm saving them for the end. So let's just start alphabetically and go with Bats in the beginning. So, Bats has no mature effect, so its value as a mature card is nothing. Its ambush effect, however, and its trap effect are incredibly good, and basically the same in terms of value. Both are going to be killing a day action for the hunters, and depending on how you do the math, 2 day actions, because since you are going to be using this card to make the hunters move in a direction you want, theoretically the hunters are going to have to waste a turn moving again. This card's especially good in places where there aren't rails, so you really are just making them waste a day action unless they've set up their fast horses properly. So I would say this is maybe the second best encounter in the game. It really limits the hunter's movement, and if the hunters can't even get to you, you win games. Understand that it doesn't have any good mature effect, so you really don't want to throw this down early unless you're using it to protect a vampire, either with Hide, which is usually how you do it, or maybe Dracula's Brides, or Hidden Schemes, you know, those things that cause you to be able to put multiple encounters down so you can combo with them. You know, the idea being that a hunter moves into a space, you ambush with bats, the hunter then can't kill the vampire and is forced to move out of the space and then become delayed, and then they have to, like, wait until November before they can get back into space and kill the vampire. Unless there's another hunter nearby, so, you know, understand that. This is really good at really messing up a single hunter. If there are multiple hunters, not as big of a deal, but yeah, really important. Do understand that this will not protect you if the hunters move into your space. Yes, the hunter's next action is going to be to have you move them somewhere else, but them being delayed or having a Bats token on them doesn't mean that they don't fight you. They still fight you, so this isn't going to protect you. But it can really put a monkey wrench into the hunter's plans. You only get 2 of them, so use them wisely. This isn't a mature card, this is a trap card and an ambush card. And do you want to ambush with it or trap with it? Maybe ambush with it, because since it has no good mature effect, if the hunters just move on, you're going to feel pretty bad because you have this great encounter that wasn't able to do anything. But I will say that generally speaking, you don't want to ambush with encounters. Generally, you want to force the hunters to search places. And I'll get into why later. But I think I've explained enough what and how to use bats. Alright, let's talk about Desecrated Soil. Now, Desecrated Soil's mature effect is... I mean, it's not as good as you think. It does the same thing that Feed does, but you have to have a card on your trail to last the entire time, and nobody gets to it with a Heavenly Host, which the hunters need to be getting. Anyway. Yeah, the mature effect is not very great. However, this card is actually quite good for its ambush effect. Why? That doesn't seem very good. Okay, you draw 3 encounters and discard 3. That's not as good as Dark Call. But it's still really, really good. You are milling out your bad encounters and getting those really good ones. What you need to pick up as I go through these encounters is that some encounters are just not good, and some encounters are the best thing ever. The game is designed that way on purpose. It's the game. That's how the game works. You want to try to get the good encounters and not have the bad encounters. And getting the good ones early actually can be a little annoying because your hand is limited and you're like, oh dear, now I have to play an encounter. I don't really want to waste one of my good ones early, so a lot of really interesting strategy in terms of that. Managing when your good ones come out is a thing. You just have to deal with it. And this is a card that helps you do that. And sometimes you can trigger this multiple times if the hunters don't have Heavenly Host. And even if they do, this is still really good. Because discovering that the hunters have Heavenly Host is incredibly valuable. The main value of Heavenly Host in combat is if Dracula doesn't know you have it. Because while Heavenly Host is easily the best combat card in the game, if you don't know why, watch my combat video. It also is the card that has the most downsides when it's countered, but it's only countered by one card, that's Fangs. And so the chances of Dracula being able to pull off that counter are greatly increased if Dracula knows the hunters have a Heavenly Host. And this, along with Great Wolf, are the cards that Dracula uses to find out who has Heavenly Host. And it's really important. It's so good, sometimes I won't reveal my Heavenly Host to get rid of the Desecrated Soil. And I'm like, no, you healing 3 is better for me than you knowing that I have Heavenly Host. That's how good this card can be. Don't expect it to mature, but if you are in a situation where you don't really need something to slow down or hurt the hunters, it can give you a lot of really good economy in terms of encounters and in terms of information. Information is really important for Dracula when it comes to understanding what the hunters have, because that is one of the only ways that you can survive combat as Dracula. Going on to a card that is sort of the opposite, this card can't ambush, so it has 0 ambush value, and its trap value is that the hunter becomes delayed. That's not very good at all either. Okay, they lose a day action. And if the hunters had a stake and used the stake, they don't even become delayed. So, of 2 of the 3 categories, it's kind of the worst. Its mature effect, however, is the best in the game. Arguably. Some people would say a vampire with a rumor token is better, but the fact that there's an argument in the community on whether or not 7 points or a matured Hoax is better, that should tell you just how good Hoax is. It's especially good against my school of thought in the game, because you take all Dracula event cards from the discard pile, you look at them and choose one to go into your hand, and then you shuffle the rest into the deck. You basically turn off everything the hunters have been trying to do to craft the deck. All that work they've been doing to draw cards and not do night supplies and do day supplies are all undone. And it's like, okay, you're going to have to do a whole lot more work if you ever want to get a hunter event now. And sometimes when a Hoax goes off, the hunters are like, okay, no more events for us for the rest of the game, most likely. We now have to win with the events we have in hand. Sometimes that's not the mindset, but sometimes it is, and that's a really scary mindset to be in as the hunters. Would I say this card is good? It's complicated. Yeah, I mean, it has the best mature effect in the game, but in terms of holistic strategy, it's very, very specialized. And sometimes you can do good stuff with it. It's the kind of card you want to throw down if you don't think the hunters can get to it. But all the hunters have to do to get to it is just stare at it for a turn, and it goes away. So, and that feels really good as the hunters. You're like, okay, we got rid of one of the nastiest mature effect cards in the game. That sure was easy. So usually what you're going to get out of this is delaying a hunter. If you think you can mature it, use it, and understand that if you had a vampire before this card, it's going to get rid of your Hoax. So you can put down a Hoax and then a vampire, and you can combo the mature effects, but you can't put down a vampire and then a Hoax unless the vampire gets gotten rid of. And maybe sometimes do that to try to trick the hunters. Because sometimes you'll put down a vampire and the hunters will be like, okay, he put down a vampire, that means the rest of this stuff are all trash events, probably nothing we have to worry about. So maybe sometimes try to combo it, but that's getting into the mind games, and I don't really want to talk about that in this video. I want to talk about the effects of the cards so you understand their value. So this is a very one-sided card, very valuable, but understand what it very specifically does. Not talking about the vampires yet. Okay. Going on from one of the better cards to the objectively worst card. Someone tried to convince me this card was good, and they were wrong. Okay, it does 2 damage. The damage is unblockable, sort of, unless they have dogs. 2 damage isn't a lot. And that's it. No mature effect. Generally, I would never ambush with this card. Generally, I would never play this card. This is the kind of card you throw into a lair to cycle it out of your hand, or you discard with Desecrated Soil. Cards like this exist in the game, so that you're forced to play the mini-game of getting good encounters. You can get rid of these bad ones. Sometimes if you put it in a high-traffic zone, the hunters will move into it multiple times and get hit multiple times. But it's so not a nuisance that sometimes I won't even reveal a weapon when I have one to get rid of the rats, just because I really don't care. And I'm like, yeah, I really don't even want you to know that I have a pistol or a rifle. And revealing a pistol or a rifle doesn't help Dracula all that much. I mean, it's really Heavenly Host or Knife that you want to know if they have. Knowing if they have a pistol or rifle is like, oh, well, I was going to play Strength anyway, but now I'm extra going to play Strength. It doesn't give you good information, it doesn't do a lot of damage, it's counterable by dogs, it has no mature effect, discard it whenever you can. It's a bad card. Moving on to Saboteur. Now, Saboteur is interesting. Saboteur is a little bit like Bats in the sense that you can combo it to protect a vampire. You know, you move, put a vampire down, you hide, and then you put a Saboteur down. Hunter moves into your space, you ambush with the Saboteur, delays them so they can't use their night action to kill the vampire, and they have to waste another day action. That's the general combo. You can do the same thing with Fog, you can do the same thing with Bats, but Fog and Bats are your best encounters in the game, and Saboteur is kind of a trash encounter. So being able to use Saboteur to do that same effect, and you can hold on to your Bats and Fog, really actually quite good. Other than that, I wouldn't ambush with this card. Because delaying a hunter in the daytime means they're going to lose their night action. Usually, hunters don't have good night actions anyway. Now, having them hit this as a trap card in the night when they search for it, that's actually quite good, because they become delayed, and even if they reveal the pistol and rifle, they still become delayed. Which is really good. Most encounters go away when they're revealed. Saboteur sticks around until you shoot the guy. So a trap at night, then they suddenly lose their day action, and that's really good. So this would have a high trap value, medium to low ambush value, and also its mature value is really not that good. Roadblock is good as a card because you can use it when it's going to be valuable, when you know you're throwing down roadblocks to stop hunters from moving into your location or moving into your trail. Having one roadblock come out randomly, really not that good. One, because usually a lot of places have 2 methods of travel to get to them, a road and a rail, and you can only block one. And also because the timing is very rarely going to come out any time when it's going to be useful. It's really not worth the hunters worrying about this card. Sometimes the timing happens when it's going to be really valuable, but the hunters can usually see that coming, and then they're like, okay, I will reveal one of my guns and then kill you. And then it's the same situation with rats. Revealing a gun is not that big of a cost. It doesn't really do anything. It's like, okay, well, Strength, which is already the best card in the game, is now even better to play. So, yeah. A decent trap value, medium to low ambush value, and pretty low mature value. A low value card, maybe combo it to protect a vampire, but otherwise, discard fodder. Spy. Now, Spy is interesting. At first I thought Spy was a really bad card, and is, but Spy also is the only card that Dracula has to mess with horses, which is really interesting. If you've watched my other videos explaining horse economy and how to craft the ticket deck to get really powerful fast horses, you'll know just how powerful a reliable 2-move is as the hunters. Spy can really mess with that because you can discard a hunter's tickets, which sometimes that's 2 white tickets, and it's like, oh snap. That can be really bad. Now, the hunter can keep that from happening if they have dogs or if they discard a weapon. Discarding a weapon is kind of bad. It's kind of a pretty high cost. Revealing a weapon, not that big of a deal. Discarding one, especially if you're in a space or an area that's pretty far away from large cities, so you can't get items back very quickly, that can really be a detriment. So, maybe put spies down in parts of the map that don't have a lot of big cities, Baltica region, or maybe central Germany, or parts of... I don't know, look at the map, figure it out yourself. I'm not going to quote the map from memory. So just sort of think about that. Again, it's not super great. I will say that its mature effect is quite good. So good that there's not really a reason to ambush with this card because, okay, if the hunters don't search and it just slides off, you're going to get this effect anyway. And it's really good to waste hunters' night actions if you're hitting them with a bunch of encounters. Because generally the hunters don't have a lot to do at night until they start taking damage, and then they're just going to rest at night. So then once that starts happening, doing things where the hunters are like, man, I really have to use my night action to search this space to see if it's a vampire, but man, I took damage and I really want to rest. That's the situation you want to be putting the hunters in. You don't just want to be ambushing them in the day, and then they take damage and then they heal at night. It's like, congratulations, you did damage to them. And the next turn they're going to be back at full health. That's really not what you want to be doing. So that's why generally I'm going to be saying don't ambush. Don't be too predictable, but this is another similar kind of thing. You're not really gaining anything by ambushing in the day, unless you're pretty sure that person has 2 white ones, and you can't really know that. Discarding an item can be good, and it can mess with horse economy, and all of that is kind of good, but it's not great. So don't feel bad about discarding this. Alright, Sazgani bodyguards. This is one of the better damagey cards, I would say, because it can delay if the hunter has no weapons. Because of this card and wolves, that's why I always suggest that every hunter should carry at least 1 weapon. Because taking 2 damage, not that big of a deal. Taking 4 damage and becoming delayed, ooh, that's real bad. And it has a similar thing going on with the spy, where if you wait and it slides off, it just goes to Dracula and becomes a bodyguard, like the card says. It stays in front of him and he gets to use it on the next hunter who fights him. So you're going to get the effect, whether they search for it, or whether you ambush them with it, or whether it matures. So why waste the ambush? Force them to spend an action attacking you. Don't let you give them a free action. When you ambush, you're basically giving the hunters a free action. Usually hunters have to waste an action looking for the encounter. Sometimes you want to do that. Maybe if you really want bats to go off right then, or you really want fog to go off right then maybe ambush with it. But otherwise, don't give them a free action. Not with a card like Sazgani Bodyguard, since its mature effect is so good. Alright, moving on to Sazgani Mob. Okay, so this card is interesting in that it reveals the location, so you want to think about that. If this card matures and you're not going to get any value out of it, don't mature it, turn it into a lair, because you probably don't want to reveal to the hunters where that location is. Although, usually by the time a card like this matures, the hunters are going to have a general idea of where you are. This card is also interesting in that it is an AoE card. See how it says each hunter in this city has the effect happen? Sazgani Bodyguards, the hunter. Spy, the hunter. Saboteur, the hunter. Same deal, but Sazgani Mob can attack multiple hunters. The only other card like that is Wolves, says each hunter on this city. So that's an important thing to understand about this card and Wolves. One fun trick to do is if, say, a bunch of hunters are going to jump onto your location, you wait until the last one has jumped on, and then you hit them with the Sazgani mob. It's like, okay, you're going to fight 3 hunters, but each of those hunters is now going to take 3 damage unless they discard some items. Which, usually, if it's just one hunter who's hitting it, it's no choice. Alright, I will take my 3 damage, and then I'll heal next turn, and then congratulations, you were as good as rats. Which should illustrate the fact that you shouldn't ambush with this card, unless you're hitting multiple hunters. But that becomes a little bit of a tricky issue, because unlike with Sazgani Mob or Spy, the mature effect on this isn't really guaranteed. It's very common that by the time Sazgani Mob matures, nobody is in the region for Sazgani Mob to hurt them, and you won't get any value out of it. And that's when you usually turn it into a lair, and then the mob is just sadly waiting in a city, waiting for hunters to come for them to mug, and they're just a bunch of unhappy Antifa muggers waiting around to mug people, and they just can't mug. And that's just sad. Look at those guys. They want to mug people so bad, and you're just going to have them sit in the lair all game? Maybe. I mean, maybe do that. So that should be what you think about when you're thinking about if you want to ambush, because you're not going to be getting any guaranteed value out of it, like with some of the other cards. It can be really good if you're staying in a region, though, because this hits everybody in the region when it matures, and it does the same effect, and that can be really good. I think I've seen this hit 3 hunters, and it's just, I mean, it's not like the best thing ever, but it feels really good, because this is what would be considered kind of a trash encounter. And the trash encounters are basically anything but vampires or unnatural fog or bats. Some people would say Desecrated Soil is a good encounter, or not trash. It's like, I don't know. I'm kind of thinking there's like 2 tiers. There's the good encounters. Well, okay. There's the bad encounters, the good encounters, and then there's Unnatural Fog. We'll get to that. But getting a lot of value out of this, hitting a bunch of hunters, doing 3 damage to each, or even 3 damage to 3, or even just 2, that's decent value. I mean, usually your encounters, like wolves or Sazgani bodyguards or rats, are only going to do 2 damage. This has a good chance of doing 3 damage, which is usually what the hunters should do. You know, just take the damage, unless you really think you can get items back, or if you have Garlic Wreath, or maybe if you have some items you really don't want, like if it's late in the game and you have a stake for some reason. Then maybe discard, but usually you're going to take this for the damage. I should also mention, this card seems like it's good against Dr. Seward. It's not. Oh, you can do 4 damage against him because you can have 4 items. Yeah, and then he heals next turn, and then he's back to, oh, congratulations, you're as good as a rat again. Yeah, it's not as good as you think against the Doctor. Doctor is really good. He's the best fighter. He has the most items, and he can heal really fast. He's real good. He's real good, and one of my favorite characters from the book, as opposed to all of the other characters, which are also my favorite characters. Man, the Dracula book is so good. Each of the hunters are just, like, so good. Man. That book is really about the hunters. It's really not about Dracula. Dracula is actually in that book very little, but I'm getting on a tangent talking about the book, and you don't want to hear about that. You want to hear about how to be evil. So, on that note, let's talk about the most evil card. Unnatural Fog. Oh my gosh. Okay, remember in my combat guide video where I was talking about how great Heavenly Host is, and I was like, sit down, pull up a chair, we're gonna be here a long time, pour yourself a nice cup of your favorite legal beverage, and we're gonna talk a long time about how insane this card is. This card does everything. This card protects Dracula. This card can trap hunters. This card can block hunters from moving. This card can protect vampires. This card can do your taxes, sing you a nice lullaby, and cook you a nice Rotizian dinner. This will do everything you could possibly want. To really understand what all this card can do, you really just need to read the rules, because a lot of these effects are just basically read the rule book on what this does. Wolf form is like that. Everyone should find the rule book and read what all wolf form does and how that works, but this isn't a guide on that. This is a guide on Unnatural Fog. So I'm just going to go over real quick Unnatural Fog and what the heck it do. So, at dawn or dusk, if Dracula's in a city with a hunter and a fog token, Dracula can choose not to start a combat with that hunter. That's crazy. This is the only effect in the game that does that. only effect in the game that is a Dracula. No, I will not fight now, thank you very much. There is nothing you can do about that if fog is in my space. Oh, you all are still in my space? I will hide in this fog. You may still now not attack me. That is so good. What else does it do? Oh, let's keep reading. A hunter cannot move into, out of, or pass through a city that has a fog token. That is nuts. That is so nuts. You can do so much crazy stuff with that by, like, blocking off entire regions where the hunters are like, okay, we kind of have to wait 5 turns to even, like, think about getting to Dracula now. These unnatural fog tokens are like nuclear bombs of power that Dracula has, that he just has to use in the coolest way. You only get 2 of them, understand that, and use them accordingly. Now, you're likely only going to be able to use one of them because one of them is most likely going to get hit with either a forewarned or behind the veil. But playing around that is really fun, both as the hunters and as Dracula. The hunters are like, okay, we're pretty sure he has fog, so we're going to trade forewarned, and we need to make sure that it's on Van Helsing so we can trade it. Oh, but Godleming's the one who's moving first, and Van Helsing can't trade it to Godleming until after Godleming's moved, and let's hope we get Speedy Telegraph so we can switch it up and have Van Helsing trade it, and then Godleming move, and all of this stuff, and then he moves in, and it's like, ha, I had rats the whole time, I didn't have fog, and this game is so fun. All the little mind games that you're playing, or Dracula holding on to fog and being like, do I think he's going to draw behind the veil and get rid of one of my fogs? Or get rid of the one fog that I have? Maybe I'll throw it down now to protect a vampire, and then hope behind the veil comes out, and then he doesn't kill my fog, and then later on I'm going to draw my other fog. Because Dracula is going to basically draw all of his encounters in a game, especially if you use Dark Call. Every Dracula should use Dark Call early, by the way. If you can use it multiple times, oh boy, that's real good. But I'm not even done talking about all of the other things fog does. The other thing fog does, a hunter cannot perform a search action in a city that has a fog token. So this is like a super Saboteur. When there's fog in the space, and again, if this is a port or it's matured, you put 2 fog in the space. And the fog goes away every dusk, which is after the day actions. Yeah, at the end of dusk, Dracula must remove 1 fog token from each city on the board that has at least 1 fog token. So that's how fog tokens come off, which is an argument for why you want to actually not ambush with it, but wait to play it. Although I'll get into that. I was talking about how fog can protect vampires. Because you can't search in a space with fog, sometimes you can just guarantee a vampire matures. Because it's like, okay, you're gonna have to wait for basically ever until the fog is gone, and then you can search the space. Yeah, that's really good. Although most likely by then the hunter will have done enough supply actions that they will maybe have a stake at that point. So understand its limitations in that regard, but it's still better than bats or Saboteur in terms of protecting vampires. Yeah, this card does everything. If you discard this, seek medical attention immediately. Not because you're an idiot, I would never say that, but because I will physically go to your house and say mean things to you. I don't even possess that ability, but somehow I will gain that ability if you discard this card on purpose. Okay, so what else was I talking about? Oh yes, let's get to the beginning of talking about this card. So it's mature effect. You get to pick a city in the region and throw fog down. That's actually nuts, because you can reach out and pick a city with a hunter in it and be like, oh, you're now trapped there. Or pick Dracula's own location, or a location Dracula wants to move to. And then you just have this fortress of fog. And it's like, okay, you can't get to me for 2 turns. Ha ha ha. I will sit here and hide and then feed, and oh joy, I just get to take a deep breath and look at this beautiful fog. It's, man, yeah, you can use it to block off a trail. You can do all this stuff with it. Now, that mostly only comes into play if you've stayed in the region when fog matures. The chance of that happening, not huge, but usually you can still grab a hunter. It sort of has some of that same effect that Sazgani Mob has, that by the time it matures, maybe you won't have the effect, but... And that can be bad. That actually can feel really bad if Unnatural Fog slides off the trail and didn't do anything. Then you just wasted one of your best cards in the game and it didn't end up triggering. Yeah, that's basically the best way to not deal with fog, is to ignore it. Which is why the whole hiding and using it to protect a vampire is such a good idea, because then they really have to deal with the fog, or that vampire is going to mature. So let's talk about its ambush effect. Now, because fog is removed after the day actions at dusk, that makes you think that you want to maybe just use it as a trap. Don't ambush with it. But this is Unnatural fog. It's good at everything. So it has this extra effect that if it's day when this goes off, the hunter also becomes delayed. So it's like, okay, we understood that you might think that this card is like, maybe there's a situation where it's not good, but we're going to fix that. So it has a separate extra thing it does if you ambush in the day, which is usually when you ambush. That it delays the hunter, and yeah, that's good. Still, it is really good if you can use it as a trap. The hunter thinks that there's a vampire and they search. Surprise, it's fog, and they're trapped there for super long. Longer than they would be if you had ambushed with it, because if you ambush with it in the day, after that day action, dusk happens, one token is removed, and then after the next day action, the token is removed. Whereas if they search for it, next day action, then one is removed, then next day action, another one is removed, and then the next day action, then they can do something that isn't supply. Although supplying is good, and sometimes Draculas can accidentally help the hunters by forcing them to just stay in one place and supply, and it's like, oh great, I just got Consecrated Ground and Money Trail, so that was really good. Generally, this is a card you use when you think a bunch of hunters are about to jump on your location. And of course, it's best to use in a port, because it says that. If it's a port, you place a second fog token there. Using it just at land feels like a bit of a waste, unless you're desperate and you're like, I really, really, really can't afford to fight right now. I have 3 health, and there are 2 hunters that might jump on me. I am going to die next turn if they find me. I have to play fog. That's kind of a situation you don't want to be in, but again, Unnatural fog cures all of your illnesses. So that it helps you in that situation too. Yeah, I would say like 20% of good Dracula play and good Dracula strategy involves understanding how to use this specific card well. But what's crazy is all of the uses are good. It's a Swiss Army chainsaw. It's not a Swiss Army knife. It's a Swiss Army chainsaw. It's not just that it can do everything. It can do everything better than any other card can do it. I mean, it technically doesn't score you points, but it can help you do that if you combo it with a vampire. Oh man, all right. I have fanboyed over this card enough. But one more thing. You can use bats and then force somebody to move into fog. And then they're delayed, and then they get hit with fog. It's really funny. I did it in 2nd edition once, and it was super fun. Okay, enough talk about fog. Ha! Joke! I was fooling you! I ain't done talking about fog! I ain't even begin. So let's talk about 2nd edition. No, I'm actually kidding. Maybe I should be doing its own video on fog. Okay, wolves. This will be pretty quick. Wolves is... The only real good thing about wolves is they can hit every hunter. That's kind of good. Revealing weapons isn't that big of a cost. It has sort of the same effect of fog and mobs, that by the time it matures, it's probably not going to hit any hunters. It's good if you can hit Van Helsing with it, because it potentially can do half his health, but usually the hunters are going to have like a weapon. 2 damage is not that much. So whether or not you ambush with this, it's kind of a tough question, because its mature effect isn't that good. Usually hunters will search anyway, though, so making them waste the night action to go after this is good, because, again, if they're wasting their night actions looking for encounters instead of healing from the encounters that previously hit them, that's kind of the situation you want to be in. But, yeah, it's not that good. It can do high damage, but usually it doesn't. Throw it out there, maybe you'll get something out of it, but not much else to say. It's not a huge defense. Sometimes it can be okay if hunters move into Dracula's location and you reveal it and you're like, okay, I know you have a knife and a rifle. That helps me now. You revealed those. You didn't take any damage, but I know you can counter my escape as bad, so that helps me a little bit. So that can be kind of nice. But then, like, they reveal one weapon. It's like, I reveal a pistol. I took 2 damage. It's like, well, that's useful, I guess. Not really. And yeah, you want to reveal the pistol, not the rifle, because knowing if they can cancel your escape is bad is a big deal as Dracula. It's subpar. I mean, it's probably better than both of these. Well, maybe not Saboteur. No, Saboteur is actually pretty good with the combo. And Spy actually has that anti-horse effect. It's better than Rats. So, yeah. Wolves, second worst card of the game, I guess, if we're doing tier lists. Throw it down, maybe it can do something. Let's talk about the vampires. So, Aristocratic Vampire is very similar to Hoax, in the sense that it doesn't do anything and it delays. You can't ambush. You can't ambush, and the hunter becomes delayed when they try to search for it. And it has a reveal effect that gets you points. I would argue Hoax is better, but Hoax doesn't clear spaces 4, 5, and 6. So this is a vampire. All the vampires have this effect where they clear the next 3 spaces in the trail, so you want to space your vampires out by 3, unless you want to double vamp because you're pretty sure one of them's going to get caught. Whether or not to do that is a question of strategy. I'm really just talking about effects of cards here. This is one of the... I mean, there's 3 of them. There's only 5 of your fighty vampires. You're going to draw some of these, and the hunters are going to have to deal with them. They're just speed bumps. Throw it down. Drawing one of these as one of your first draws isn't bad, because there's a decent chance you might be able to mature it. It does what it says on the tin. Any hunter can just look at it begrudgingly for one day and kill it, and if they have a stake, not even that happens. Although having a hunter waste a stake on an aristocratic vampire instead of one of your fighty vampires is actually kind of good. Because stakes you really want to use to get out of those combats. Getting out of, like, wasting a... not having a day action skipped, it's kind of good, but not that good. You don't get to choose, and you reveal the stake before you go. And so if it was a vampire, you can't unreveal the stake. It's going to go off either way. So it's really kind of moot of a point. Throw these down when you're far away from hunters. Not when you're near hunters, most likely, because usually when you're near hunters and you throw these down, the first hunters are going to go, and they're probably not going to be searching. But they might be, and maybe you can slow them down with this. They move next to you, and then search, and then, oh, their next day action is skipped. And, okay, that's kind of nice. You can use Hoax the same way, but Hoax has a better mature effect. I don't know if I would suggest discarding these, unless you had a lot of vampires, or unless you had 2 fogs and 2 bats. If you had 2 fogs and 2 bats and you drew something, well, but if you drew anything else that wasn't a vampire, you always want to have a vampire to throw down in case you're able to really get away from the hunters and you want to throw something down to try to mature it. So, yeah, it's the worst vampire, but sometimes it's what you get and it's what you'll use. Let's talk about new vampire, and also reckless vampire. I'll talk about these both, sort of at the same time. They both are kind of the same thing, and I'll talk about their differences. So, new vampire has 6 health, reckless vampire has 4 health. New vampire, hunters who are in the space can become delayed to also fight the vampire. That's pretty significant. That it's possible. It's not that significant of a cost. It actually just makes a lot of sense. It's basically just the hunter is also spending their action to fight the vampire. It'd be pretty dumb if they could just fight the vampire for free and then get another night action. And it really doesn't limit anything. It just usually burns their next night action. That's if the fight happens at night and you don't ambush. Although, if you ambush and there happen to be multiple hunters, they can become delayed, and that usually will burn a day action, although also sometimes will burn a night action if those hunters already went. The point being, generally I would consider this vampire as this is the kind of vampire Dracula uses to protect himself personally, because 6 health is actually a lot of health. With 6 health, Heavenly Host doesn't kill you, Holy Bullets doesn't kill you with a gun, and Heroic Leap doesn't kill you. All 3 of those things I just listed do kill reckless vampires. Heroic Leap one-shots, Heavenly Host one-shots, and a gun with Holy Bullets one-shots. Even a gun with Holy Bullets while being mesmerized one-shots a Reckless Vampire. None of that happens to a new vampire. So new vampires are actually quite hard to kill. Now, they give fewer points when they mature, so that should be kept into account. It's really kind of tough when you come across a new vampire. It's like, man, it's really hard to kill this thing. And I'm not stopping a lot of damage when I don't kill it, so maybe I'll just ignore it. Although, points are points, and usually you want to kill it anyway. I want to talk a lot about combat with vampires, but I'm not, because here's how combat with vampires go. The hunters run away, and then they stake the vampire next turn. That's just what happens. So the question is, how much value are you going to get out of the fight? Maybe you do 2 damage, maybe you do 4 damage, maybe things go crazy and you do like 6 damage or a lot. But the hunters are usually going to get away, and you're only going to do minimal amounts of damage. And maybe you would have been able to do more with a mob. Now, of course, this has more threat. You know, it can mature, and the hunters really have to deal with this. And vampires are better than any of the other trash encounters, except for maybe Hoax, because that has a decent mature effect. But it's not going to be... There's not a huge amount of strategy in it. Sometimes there is, and sometimes you have to do tricky things of trading Heroic Leap to the right person at the right time, so you kill a vampire with a rumor token before it matures. Sometimes that's interesting, but usually you're just going to get minor damage out of these things, and then they're going to get staked. And don't feel bad about that. You will probably have to win the game without maturing a single vampire. You're going to have to win the game through the Fury of Dracula ability and maybe killing some hunters. Maybe you'll mature a vampire, but you're not going to get out a lot of points out of it, except for with Reckless Vampires. Now, you might actually get some points out of this, not through its mature effect, although, 4 points, that's as good as an Aristocratic vampire, but through this Fangs effect. Now, this is the kind of vampire you actually might want to ambush with. Although the new vampire you might want to ambush too if you're trying to protect Dracula himself. When you ambush with the Reckless Vampire and you and you resolve Fangs, not play it, you have to actually resolve it, so if they counter Fangs, it doesn't go off, you get a point. And that's kind of nice. Sometimes you can get a lot of points if you get into lots of fights with one of these. They don't have stakes for whatever reason. You get into fights and you can get some points. And that's kind of nice. And you wanting to play Fangs makes Heavenly Host less of a card that wants to play. Now, first of all, the hunters generally don't want to play Heavenly Host because they're saving those for Dracula, because Heavenly Host is the most powerful card in the game, and wasting it on a vampire is pretty worthless. Never play Heavenly Host on a new vampire unless it's going to kill the vampire, unless the vampire is at 4 or less health. And even then, probably don't play it still. It may be worth the vampire maturing over wasting a Heavenly Host. And playing a Heavenly Host against a Reckless Vampire is risky because they are prone to play Fangs, and Fangs counters Heavenly Host. Things like Garlic are really good against Reckless Vampires. I already explained how good Holy Bullets is against it, because usually you're going to ambush with the Reckless Vampire, and when you're ambushing, that's going to be happening at day, unless the whole Long Night situation happened, or you moved at night and were ambushed at night, which is why you shouldn't be using Long Night, by the way, generally. The ambush is going to be happening in the day, which means strength isn't going to be breaking the guns, which means you can play guns kind of willy-nilly, and even if you get mesmerized, a gun plus Holy Bullets will kill the vampire still. So that's a point for why Holy Bullets is good. So think about that. Reckless Vampires tend to be pretty easy to kill, though. But again, the way you're going to kill these things is by staking them. Or maybe you have to get into a fight, but 4 damage is pretty easy to do. I mean, a punch and a knife, a punch and a crucifix, and he thinks he can mesmerize in the second round because you punched in the first round and that was your thing that cancels mesmerize. It's a matter of combat. Vampires are pretty easy to kill. You'll get a little bit of value out of them, but that value being points, kind of better than that value just being a couple damage, and maybe you can get some damage in too. Damage is not as good as you think. Sometimes it can be good in certain circumstances where the hunters will have to spend a lot of actions healing up, and maybe that's the hunter that's closest to Dracula, and then you really slow him down and attacking you. Sometimes that happens. Usually what happens, you ambush with a vampire, you do 2 or 4 damage, they run away, they heal next turn, and then, okay, you did 3 damage. You were now just as good as a Sazgani mob, which is kind of a bad encounter, and you wasted one of your vampires. Okay, that's alright. I guess that hunter's gonna have a lot more night actions, and then they'll have something to do with it. Which is why you want to think about how you want to combo your encounters. You want to put encounters together that complement each other. Sometimes you can do a trick where you move and then you hide and you have both of those be vampires. And then you have 2 vampire fights in a row. Then you get to see the hunter run away twice. Which is usually what they try to do, and you'll try to mesmerize, but then maybe they won't, and it's a pretty hard... That's where the game gets really rock, paper, scissory, because the number of results that are potentially trying to be gone for are greatly reduced in vampire encounter fights. But yeah, consider combos. Damage is most valuable when you can do a lot of damage. Using saboteurs and bats and fog to protect your vampires, to mature them. Your encounter's main objective is to protect Dracula. You'll lose the game by dying. You're this evil supervillain who doesn't care about your people, and everything you're looking at, you need to be thinking, how does this help me not be killed? Will this card slow the hunters down by either hurting them and forcing them to not move forward, although usually they're going to waste their night actions for that anyway, or is it going to maybe kill somebody? I mean, sometimes you can kill with an encounter. I've seen it happen. It's rare, but it could happen. That's what you have to be thinking about. This is a super villain simulator, and you're setting up your evil lairs and your plans, and you just have to think through how to do that. Somebody has to play the villain, as I said before, and you playing well is, first of all, going to make you a better hunter, because you'll understand how Dracula plays, and the hunter you're playing against, they're going to become better players too. There's a reason why we have games where some people play the bad guys, so that we can simulate these things, so that we can get better at hunting down the forces of evil in this small-scale simulation that still stimulates our brains cognitively, and hopefully that cognitive stimulation can help us in the future and in the real world as we go out and fight the real forces of evil. Because again, this is all allegories for various evil things. So go forth and fight evil things, and may you do so with God's speed.